By-elections have been called in Wakefield and Tiverton after their previous representatives, both Conservatives, were forced to step down due to scandals of a sexual nature. In Wakefield, the former Conservative MP Imran Ahmed Khan stood down after being convicted of sexually assaulting a 15-year-old boy in 2008. He was jailed for 18 months. And down in Tiverton and Honiton, former Tory MP Neil Parish resigned after admitting he had watched pornography on his phone twice while in the Commons chamber. Well, both of these by-elections taking place in 2 days' time, how will they be affected by the rail strikes we're seeing this week and all the other issues across the country? Well, joining me now is Nigel Nelson, political editor at The Sunday Mirror and The Sunday People. Nigel, thanks for joining us this morning. I suppose the big question when it comes to these by-elections, both arisen from particular local circumstances, is how much will the local play into how people vote versus the big national stories of this week?
Well, I think that the constituencies are very different. So in Wakefield, for instance, the average house price is 173,000. In Tiverton, we're talking about 275,000. So they are different kind of areas. Of course, local issues always do come into play, but I think this is very much a national kind of test. What Tory MPs have told me that they found on the doorstep, especially when they were campaigning in the local election campaign, is in seats which are traditional Tory seats but Liberal Democrat facing, their supporters are really, really angry about Partygate. So in Tiverton, I think you'll find that will play really big, which is why the Lib Dems may well be able to overturn a 24,000 Tory majority. Now, when we look at Wakefield, it's slightly different there. I think that people voted there for the Tories as a red wall seat because of their Brexiteers. But now there's the cost of living crisis, which affects people there particularly. And so with the Tories only defending a 3,300 majority, and polling is suggesting that Labour is now 20 points ahead, that's almost a shoo-in for the Labour candidate Simon Lightwood.
I wonder to what extent, therefore, these results are baked in. Does anyone seriously expect the Tories have a hope of winning either of these by-elections?
Well, I think the Tories have given up with Wakefield, that they're pretty certain they're going to lose that back to Labour. Things are very different down in Tiverton. I mean, if you find that the Tories lose a 24,000 majority, that is going to be a really big blow. And I think that's where people will start looking once again at Boris Johnson's leadership. The whole point about Boris Johnson was that a lot of Tory MPs held their noses and voted for him as leader, largely because he was a vote winner. Now, if he turns out to be a vote loser, they're going to start to rethink that decision.
A lot of people will be being disrupted today because of these strikes taking place right across the country. There's a big blame game going on in Westminster. The Tory party is calling them Labour's strikes. The Labour Party is saying it's up to the government to sort out a deal between the unions and, indeed, the rail companies. Who are people likely to believe in this battle of perception?
Well, I mean, the problem here is that Grant Shapps is the Transport Secretary. He's responsible for the rail network in the same way he's responsible for air travel, which is not going so well either. And yet he's abdicated all responsibility and says it's up to the employers to do the negotiating with the unions and not up to the government. I find that a bizarre kind of position to be in. The very least that Grant Shapps could be doing is actually talking to both sides, trying to sort out some kind of deal. And he seems not to want to do that. Now, there is the suggestion that rail strikes now become a real sort of wedge issue. And as a result of them, people will be more inclined in those two by-elections to vote Tory. I'm not sure that's true. You're absolutely right. There is a blame game going on with all sides. But the least you would expect the Secretary of State for Transport to do was roll up his sleeves, get involved and try and solve it.
It's interesting that the Labour Party haven't been more equivocal on where they stand on this. Now, Sir Keir Starmer is saying that he wishes these strikes weren't going ahead, but he can't bring himself to condemn them. And even the Shadow Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, and Shadow Levelling Up Secretary Lisa Nandy have said that they support the strikers. Wes has even said that he would vote for the strike to go ahead were he a member of the RMT. Would Labour be in a better position if they were less in a muddle over this situation?
Well, I think you're absolutely right that Keir Starmer has very much been sitting on the fence over this one. I also think it's actually quite difficult for the Labour leader. I mean, on one hand, no one wants to see the nation disrupted in the way it is at the moment. On the other, Labour traditionally supports working people. So it has put him in a tricky position. This has not actually helped a lot by Mick Lynch of the RMT, who has not been absolutely clear about what the pay demand is. Now, we seem to be getting the idea that it's somewhere around 7% he wants. The train operators are offering 2% with another 1% on top of that, provided that there are redundancies. But he's not been absolutely clear about what he would actually settle for. My own feeling is that what you can't do is go for above inflationary rises, because that just stokes prices. But somewhere in the region of around 5%, where you're splitting the difference, would seem to be a kind of fair kind of settlement.
It's a really interesting one. I'm not sure that we're getting any closer to any sort of agreement between these two sides, and room for a week of disruption, possibly more, possibly spreading to other sectors. It's going to be fascinating to see how this plays out in our politics. But for now, Nigel Nelson, thank you so much for talking us through those issues, and particularly how they impact those by-elections this week. Now, there are 15 candidates standing in Wakefield, and stay with me here because we have to do this. They are Sir Archibald Stanton Earl Eaton from the official Monster Raving Loony Party, love them. Nadeem Ahmed for the Conservatives. Akef Akbar, who's independent, Paul Bickerdike from the Christian People's Alliance, Mick Dogson of the Freedom Alliance, Jada Franson, an independent, Jordan Gaskell for the UK Independence Party, and David Herden of the Yorkshire Party. There's also Therese Hurst from the English Democrats, Christopher Jones from the Northern Independence Party, Simon Lightwood for Labour, Jamie Needle from the Liberal Democrats, Ash Roth of the Green Party, Ashley Simon from Britain First, and Chris Walsh from Reform UK. And now, finally, fortunately, there are only 8 candidates standing in Tiverton and Honiton. Let's run through them. They're Jordan Donoghue-Morgan for the Heritage Party, Andy Fone for Reform UK, Richard Ford for the Liberal Democrats, Helen Herford for the Conservatives, Liz Poole for Labour, Frankie Ruffalo for the For Britain Movement, Bren Walker for UKIP, and Jill Westcott for the Green Party. There we go. What a marathon. Obligations anyway.